Today we're going to speak about a very interesting cosmogony, that is the Babylonian cosmogony. I wouldn't say it's too popular. We don't learn about it in school, at least. At least I didn't learn it in school. I come from Barcelona, by the way, so Southern European. And this is going to be fascinating. So I'm going to start with an introduction here. So if I start talking about gods and about fights, it's not going to make too much sense. So I think it's better to start with an introduction on the history and the geography of the area we're talking about when we say Babylon. Here is Mesopotamia in the year around 3,300 before Christ. Mesopotamia, yes? This is modern-day Iraq, Kuwait here, yes? To the east, you have Persia, Mesopotamia. What's the etymology of the name? It means the land between two rivers. Yeah? Which are the two rivers? Euphrates and Tigris. Yeah? Mesos means middle. Potamos is a river. And you have also the word hippopotamus. Yeah? It means a water horse. And I think that in Swedish it's even vattenhäst, right? Like literally. Flodhäst. Okay. Okay, even more, exactly. Right, so this is the Sumer. Yeah? Sumer is the most ancient urban civilization that we know of. So they lived in cities, right? And this is the most ancient civilization that we know of that lived in cities. You can see it here. Then what happens is that Sumer actually disappears, is invaded by the Akkadians. It's another civilization, and they settle along all of this valley right here, right, between the two rivers. And this is the Akkadian Empire around the year 2200. These people spoke a language that is called Akkadian, and I will show you in a second how it looks. So we have the Akkadians, right, in the year 2200. Can you imagine how distant these time periods are? Year minus 2200, yes? Now we're in the year 2000. So these peoples were as distant from the Romans as the Romans are for us. Just to put things into perspective, how old we're talking here, yeah? Akkadian Empire, 2200 years before Christ. Also, one interesting detail, I think, you can see here that the water, so the sea, actually reached into Ur, yeah? All of this region right here, because the sea levels were different. Yes, interesting. Then, so we have talked about the Akkadians, and then what happens is that the Akkadian Empire is substituted by the old Babylonian Empire, and that's the time of Hammurabi. Maybe you have heard this name before, right? So now we're talking about the year 1800 before Christ. Hammurabi, the name is famous because of the Code of Hammurabi. Maybe you've heard about it. It's a code with about somewhere around 200 laws, and it's basically written in a way that says, if this happens, then do this. Yes. And also the Code of Hammurabi, we will talk about it later in another lecture. You can see references to the Code of Hammurabi in the Bible, actually, in the Deuteronomy, one of the five books of Moses. For example, the eye for an eye. That's written actually first in the Code of Hammurabi. Yes. Then eventually, this Babylonian Empire, old Babylonian Empire that begins with Hammurabi, expands, and here you have the new Babylonian Empire at the time of Nebuchadnezzar II, around the year 600. So this is already a bit closer to us. And you can see the entire extension of the empire and goes from Egypt, yes, here, to here's our Gulf, yeah, that we talked about, and all of Syria, Babylon. This is the kingdom of Nebuchadnezzar II. He will be super important for the Jews, in case you didn't know. He will be super important for the Jews. One interesting point to make here also is that here in Nineveh, there was a a large library. And the knowledge was concentrated in this town. It was very important for those times. And you will see why also later. So Nabucodonosor, he was a very wealthy king. And what he did, one of the things, most famous things that he built, not himself probably, but he had slaves and people who worked for him, was this door. Have you ever seen this door before?
Is that in the Metropolitan Art Museum?
It's in the Pergamon Museum in Berlin. It's in Berlin, yes. So you can visit it in Berlin. I don't know if anyone has been there. It's majestic, yes. You see the colors, blues are beautiful. This is called lapis lazuli. And it also became very famous in the Renaissance because the color ultramarine that Titian, for example, used in paintings, it comes from lapis lazuli that has been smashed. And lapis lazuli, the etymology itself, it means stone from heaven, yeah, stone from the sky. So it obvious, yeah. This do you know how this gate is called? Does anyone remember what this gate? Ishtar's gate. Okay. Do you know who Ishtar was? She was a goddess, right? Ishtar, this is one of the gates to Babylon, yeah? There were many gates. Ishtar was the goddess that can be associated to Venus, so the goddess of love. And Ishtar has a very interesting story. Ishtar, she reigns, right, in here with us. Love is everywhere, right? She decides that she's ambitious, and she decides that she wants to go to the underworld and reign in the underworld as well. So one fateful day, she says, I'm going to go down to the underworld. That's a catabasis, yeah? The Greeks would say a catabasis. She says, I'm going to go to the underworld, and I'm going to say that I am the queen also. Well, what happens is that as she walks down the underworld, she has to cross several gates. 7 gates, to be actually precise. And in every gate that she crosses takes away something from her. So it takes away the garments, takes away her vitality, you could say. And in the end, when she reaches down, and apparently her sister is there, so the queen of the underworld is called Ereshkigal, is there. She basically is so powerless that, yeah, basically dies. The story doesn't say it explicitly, but you can understand that she dies, yes? So what happens as Ishtar goes down is that the gods that are living here with us and are observing the world, they start to see that the crops don't grow, that the animals don't mate, that the young people in love don't have sex. Fertility is dying, yes? And this should already ring a bell to all of you who have read a little bit of Greek mythology, actually. Because this is the story of Persephone, Proserpine, in Roman times. So what happens is that the gods are very worried about this, and they decide to take action, and they talk to, they send an offer to Ereshkigal, so the queen of the underworld, and they say, you need to give us back Ishtar, yes, because the world cannot continue like this. And yes, they send an offer, and she returns. This is the Akkadian version of the myth, so Akkadian being the later civilization that we saw, the second civilization. If you read the Sumerian account, there's also a king involved and a little bit of love. So the differences are substantial, but it's more or less the same story. What is the point of the story? What is the point of the story?
To understand the year?
Yes, and most importantly, that you cannot return from the dead just like that. Spring tries to triumph over death, but it cannot. And that is something that the gods have have to grasp, so they have to understand that the world works like this, but also the kings and also everyone else, as mortals. Spring, no matter what happens, if she dies, that's it. You cannot survive death, basically. So this is the story of Ishtar. Ishtar, we will come back to her actually later. Also, you'll see. This is the story behind the gate. Maybe they don't tell you in the Pergamum Museum. I don't know, but I think it's super interesting. Yeah. So back to the presentation. This is one of the gates of Babylon, but Babylon is also Mesopotamia. Let's say as a whole is also very interesting because the amount of rainfall that you had in the past, in ancient times, was not constant. There were periods with very warm and dry weather, and then suddenly you would get very intense rains. So a civilization that could understand the weather patterns and build canals between the rivers to ensure a constant flow of water to the cities would thrive. And this is exactly what the ancient Sumerians and later Akkadians mastered. They mastered the irrigation system and agriculture. So they were very wealthy. Not only that, but when you look at the rivers, you see that there are other things than just water. You have reeds, and you have mud also. Lots of mud, lots of clay. So it's not surprising to know that these peoples came up with what we believe is the first written system in history. We're talking about years around 3,500 before Christ. So that's the birth of history. And you can see here in clay, right? They have written some symbols. Of course, it makes sense that in the beginning, our writing system consists of very visual symbols. And then what happens, here I have a picture of one of my books. Here you can see the pictogram. So for example, look at heaven there, up there. So 3,500 BC, you see the star, right? But then you start to make it more abstract. The symbol becomes more abstract. And then cuneiform, 700 BCE. Cuneiform is this writing system. You see that it's pretty abstract. And the phonetic equivalent of the name of the star is An. An. So this is what they did, because of course I told you that Sumer was the first urban society, the first urban civilization that we know of. And an urban civilization cannot work without keeping records of things, whatever. The economy, politics, no, it's like, yeah, I will give you 2 sheep if you give me 3 horses. I don't know, they have to keep records, so it makes a lot of sense that writing was invented then. And this is how they did it, right? I told you that there are lots of reeds next to the river, so basically you take one reed, you split it, and you get this stylus. And this is why we call this language cuneiform, because it's a wedge, right, that you press on clay, because there's a lot of clay there, and you press it like this, and you have these sort of symbols. And I'm going to show you. This is an image of Cyrus's cylinder. Cyrus, we will talk about Cyrus. He was a Persian king that invaded Babylon, and this is why the Babylon Empire fell around the year 580 BC, something like that. So he wrote a cylinder of clay like this, and he wrote it in Akkadian, so everyone would understand. And in this line right here, he says, "I am Cyrus, king of the world, the great king, the powerful king, king of Babylon, king of Sumer and Akkad, king of the 4 quarters of the world." This is what it says here. And Cyrus's name is this one. You can see it here. It's Kura-Ash. Yeah? And it just so happens that I have radioactive clay here. It's just Play-Doh. It's just children's. And I thought that maybe it would be interesting to show you the practical side of it. I've been talking about the theory, but I think this makes a lot of sense. So what these ancient peoples did is that they had clay. So you imagine this is clay, it's not radioactive clay. and then here is a stylus. This is not a stylus, it's just a chopstick, but it's fine. And then what you do, right? In order to write courage, is Cyrus' name, well, you would start doing the wedges here. So you have 1, 2, 1, 1, 1 like this, 1 like this. I will pass it around if you want to see it. And here you have 3, right? 1, 2, 3. And you have 2, 1, Kura.
They have different lengths.
Yes, you see how I'm doing the length. I'm pressing more or less on the clay, actually. And here you have 3 long, like this, and 1 that is long. And this would be courage. And then what would happen is this would dry, and then it would be set on stone, literally. Yes? So I will let you try later if you want also. This is how they actually did it. I thought it would be fun to show you. Right, so we have a summary, right? We have talked about that. We're talking about Babylonian myths. They are coming from Mesopotamia, it's this land in Iraq. And then we have seen that whatever we're going to study now is written in Akkadian. That actually comes from this sort of writing here on clay. Yeah. So now it's time to talk about the literary sources of the myths that we will discuss. The literary sources are actually, well, you could guess, they are tablets, yeah? Clay tablets that have been buried underground for thousands and thousands of years. The account of, yes?
Can I just ask, is that from the Enuma Elish?
Exactly.
Oh.
Exactly. So the tablets of creation, now we're starting to dive into the creation myth of the Babylonians. The myth of creation is written in Akkadian, so the language that I just showed you here, and it's called the Enuma Elish. The Enuma Elish. These are the 7 tablets of creation. So it's written in 7 tablets. You can see the fragmentary state in which they found them. They were found only in 1849. 1849. So they are extremely old, but we only knew actually about them and could read them and could decipher cuneiform for the last, 150 years, yeah? These copies that you see here are from the 7th century before Christ. And the composition date, it's hard to date them, but some sources say from the 12th century before Christ, so 1,200 years before Christ, to almost 2,000 years before Christ. So again, we're talking about ridiculous amounts of time. Yeah, and here in this, these are the 7 tablets, and we will actually be interested only in the first 5 because the first 5 contain mostly all the meat. The last 2 is, yeah, more ceremonial, you could say. These 7 tablets. The creation of the world, I want to say, the creation of the world is highly ritualistic. What I mean with that is that they displayed the creation of the world in a ritual manner. Because, for example, when the king of Babylon, when they had New Year's, every New Year's, they would reenact the history of creation, the story of creation, because the king played a very fundamental part. Because the king is the one who maintains order, just like the gods that we're going to see. Yeah. So they are highly ritualistic. They don't have a lot of details. But another epic that we know of does have a lot of details, and it's very entertaining to read, and it's Gilgamesh. Gilgamesh is, again, one of the oldest stories that we know of, if not the oldest, actually. And now we're talking about the 21st century before Christ. 21st century before Christ. It's a long time ago. There are interesting similitudes between Gilgamesh's story and the Odyssey. And what is a very short summary of Gilgamesh's story? Well, he's basically a despotic king of Uruk, the city that we saw before. And basically he wants to achieve immortality. And he goes through different sets of different adventures, and basically the gods humble him. Yeah, he becomes humbled by the gods, and he's not despotic anymore. And when he tries to achieve immortality, he fails. But then the lesson that he gets is that when he comes back to Uruk, he understands that maybe his immortality comes through the survival of his empire and his peoples. Yeah, so that's more or less the story. Yes.
Wasn't it always also because he was half god and not?
Yeah, he was
Complete god.
two-thirds god, I believe, 1/3 human, something like that. Yes, yes, exactly.
So that's the mortality coming in.
Exactly. So he doesn't want to be immortal, and the story is very interesting, as I said. Gilgamesh has a lot of details, not the Enuma Elish. Yeah. So let's dive into the Enuma Elish, and you will see how this story of creation is so influential. You will see a lot of topics that we have discussed about, but this is the first one actually that we know about. Yeah. The Greeks come, as I said, 1,500 years later, something like that. And then the Bible, Genesis, it's in the year 500. So this is actually the first one.
Hasn't our Bible also got a lot from Enuma Elish?
Exactly. But this will come in another lecture. But it's fine. Then here are the waters of chaos. The Enuma Elish begins with the waters of chaos. Here you have some sounds and you have the picture. This is how it begins. Enuma Elish means actually when the sky is above. That's what it actually means, Enuma Elish. So it says, when the skies above were not yet named, nor earth below pronounced by name, Apsu, the first one, their begetter, and the maker Tiamat, who bore them all, had mixed their waters together. We have a start with water. Yeah? And I have talked about this motif in the past, actually in the first lecture and maybe in the Greek lecture as well. What is the point of starting the world with water? Water doesn't have any shape. Water takes the shape of your container, basically. If I pour this, it will just be flat. So it doesn't have any shape. It's boundless. There's nothing there. And also this chaos, yeah, you can experience this chaos actually. Have you ever been in the middle of the sea, in the middle of the ocean with a boat floating? How do you feel when you're far away? Alone. It's scary, isn't it? It's like, well, in just a moment, this ocean could swallow me and no one would ever know anything about me anymore. Yes? So I believe that it makes a lot of sense that the origins of the universe were actually comes from water. Yes? It's a sublime experience, actually. But out of all the different sources that I have read, no one really considers another reason why maybe the origin of the world was water. The ocean is isomorphic, which means that it looks the same everywhere you look, yeah? Isomorphic, and it's homogeneous also, which means that no matter where I am, it looks isomorphic. That's the same actually as the cosmological principle. So when you look at the sky, also you see in general terms, you see that the sky looks more or less the same everywhere you look. Of course, there are dotted stars. So maybe there is a reason now, or at least we can understand that it makes sense, yeah, to look at this. This is a picture by the James Webb Telescope. I always try to teach you a little bit of science in all of these lectures. And you can see how beautiful these pictures look. This is the deep field of the universe, one very small patch of the universe. And you can recognize James Webb's pictures by this diffraction pattern that looks like an hexagon, because the mirrors of the telescope are hexagons. So every time you look at a picture and it has this hexagon pattern, it's the James Webb. Right, but I didn't mention the most interesting part here, right? We have two beings out of the waters, Apsu and Tiamat. Tiamat is a monster associated with the depths of the ocean. So we have two kinds of water here. Here is Tiamat, is the depths of the ocean, and Apsu is the water that lies underground, so the aquifers, water that you can drink. Water everywhere, but there are two monsters there. Let's look at the monsters, actually. And when you look at other sources of this mythology, actually, during the Greek times, during the Hellenistic period, so when Alexander the Great went into all these places, they learned about the stories that they talked about there. And so we have another writer, Eusebius, Berosus, actually, from the 3rd century BC in the Seleucid Empire. He also tells us that the Chaldeans, the Babylonians, knew about these stories back then. Yeah. So here it says that there was once a time in which everything was darkness and water, as we have seen. Yeah. In those times, monstrous beasts were born with strange appearances. A woman called Omorka ruled over all of these creatures. It's the same story, seen from the Greek side. She's called Talath in the Chaldean language, which is translated into Greek as Thalassa, the sea. This is why I told you that this monster, Tiamat, is actually the deep waters of the sea. Yeah. So these stories, maybe they started around almost 2,000 years before Christ, but they were carried on, and the Greeks knew about them in the Hellenistic period. So you can see that they are very powerful stories. So let's try to see now what happens with the world. So if you start reading the Enuma Elish, basically what happens is that you have Tiamat, that is feminine, of course, and Apsu, that is masculine. So we have the two sexes represented here. Tiamat and Apsu. From Tiamat and Apsu come a couple of vague deities that don't play a very important role. But what happens then is that we have two more deities called Anshar and Kishar, also masculine and feminine. And who are Anshar and Kishar in a world that only has waters? Well, they are the horizon, actually. So they create the horizon. Anshar, yes, everything that from the horizon up, yes, and Kishar, everything that encircles the world, encircles the earth. Yeah. So we have a world with water, but now we have a horizon defined. Yeah. And from Anshar and Kishar come Anu. Do you remember when we looked at the Akkadian table with the symbols? I told you what is the pronunciation? How do you pronounce heaven or sky? It was An. So now you have Anu. Anu is the father of the gods. The father of the gods. Powerful. Yes. He's just like Uranus. If you remember the story of the Greek mythology is Uranus. But Anu, as powerful as he is, he has the syndrome of the Deus Otiosus, which means that he's an inactive god. He doesn't do much. Yeah, he's just there. He holds the power, but doesn't really do much. Right. So what comes next? Anu. Here we have the father of the gods, and then from Anu come gods like Ea, is the god of wisdom. Ishtar, we have talked about Ishtar, and Ishtar is associated to Venus. Yeah. Ea will play a very important role for our own story of humanity, and Ea is you have to think about Ea like a very wise god. He's just very wise.
Wellness is the same, isn't it? Wellness and Ea.
And there is the Sumerian name and the Akkadian. I'm talking just about the Akkadian, yes. There is an interesting story, another story about Ishtar, yeah, now that we have seen how Ishtar is born. There is a very interesting story with Gilgamesh also. We have talked about Gilgamesh. The story goes like this. Ishtar falls in love with Gilgamesh, our hero, but she's not correspondent. So she becomes very angry. She says, well, why don't you love me? I'm the goddess of love. Yes? And what she says, she goes to Anu, the father, the father of the sky, and he says, I want the bull of heaven, and send it to Gilgamesh and kill Gilgamesh, because I was in love with this guy, but he has broken my heart. Yeah? The symbology of a bull, why a bull of heaven? Why, out of all the animals, a bull of heaven? Well, because the sound of the bull, the bellow, the sound that the bull makes, has been associated with thunder since the Neolithic. We know about this since the Neolithic. Why the bellow of the bull has been associated with thunder? Well, let's listen. It's, you can say that it's a bit scary anyway, right? I mean, it's not a pleasant sound. So when there is thunder, I think it makes quite a lot of sense that the sound of thunder was actually associated with the bull. Which other bull did I talk about, Alex, in the Greek mythology? When I talked about the rape of Europa, do you know the painting or the story? Basically, Zeus transforms into a bull and takes Europa. Yes. Well, he transforms into a bull, and he's the god of thunder. Yes. But I think we can go beyond this. I mean, this is just maybe an anecdote, but it really isn't, because if you think about the consequences of this, is that humankind has a tendency to try to associate whatever phenomenon it experiences to agents. So we come up with agents all the time, and it makes a lot of evolutionary sense. I will tell you one example now. For example, we are walking next to one of these two rivers that we saw, next to the Euphrates, for example, and we hear a sound, and it's dark. We hear a sound coming from the river, from the reeds, yeah, and maybe it's the wind moving the reeds, yes, but our brain, what does our brain say? Our brain says it's a crocodile or it's a lion. You better run, yes. So we associate a possible danger to an agent. The agent here is the crocodile or the lion, yes. So when we hear thunder, it's not hard to generalize this conclusion and think that when we're thinking of a thunder, we associate an agent also to this thunder, and that's this bull, the bull of heaven, yeah. And this is natural in humankind. But it explains even much more, because then we push the syllogism a little bit further and we try to say, well, what happens when there is no agent? Like, for example, imagine that we have an earthquake and our children have miraculously been saved. They are not affected by the earthquake. Then what do you normally say? What do people normally say? They say, thank God. Because we want to associate phenomena to agents. And when there is no agent, we come up with something. Because that makes a lot of sense, a lot of evolutionary sense, because we're social creatures. It is rewarding to thank members of the group for their empathy. So, yeah, just food for thought. I think this point is very interesting, yeah? So maybe all of these stories are not that divine after all. There is a very important human influence here. That's what I'm trying to say. Right, so we have the gods, right? We had these two monstrous beings, Apsu and Tiamat. And now different gods. And now what's going to happen is that these gods start having a lot of fun. Of course, the world has been created. It's their place. And actually, the gods start making a lot of noise. You can see it, yeah, in this, like this painting here, beautiful, Jan Steen. And they start disturbing their ancestors. And especially, they start disturbing the primordial beings. Yeah? Apsu, one of the two monsters that we talked about, the masculine monster, he goes to Tiamat, this feminine monster, primordial monster, and says, oh, I can take it. I want to really get rid of these gods. Why did we create all of this? And Tiamat says, no, but we wouldn't destroy something that we have created. Yeah? But Apsu says, no, but we have to do something about it. And he starts to plan, yes, he starts to plan how to destroy these gods. But remember that actually, this is what Apsu says, actually. He says, their ways have become very grievous to me. By day I cannot rest, by night I cannot sleep. I shall abolish their ways and disperse them. Oh, let peace prevail so we can sleep. And Tiamat responds, as I said, how could we allow what we ourselves created to perish? We should bear it patiently. So she's actually patient, yeah? But no, Apsu is not having this. And basically he starts to plot against the gods. But remember that we talked about Ea. Ea is one of the gods. He's very smart. He's very wise. So he listened. He actually knew about this some way or another. So what he does is that he stops the problem from its root, basically makes Apsu asleep, and then he kills him. And Ea gains the powers of this primordial Apsu being, this primordial demon. Just like here, like in the Hamlet, yeah, in the beginning of Hamlet, with Claudius killing Hamlet's father. Yeah. So Ea becomes very powerful. This god of wisdom actually becomes very powerful because he has killed one of the primordial beings of chaos. And what happens next is that he and his wife give birth to a very important player in this story, Marduk. So Marduk comes from Ea, the god of wisdom, and he will be the strongest of all gods, Marduk. Marduk is very interesting when you read his description. You read that he has 4 eyes and 4 ears. Why is that? Because if you're a good leader, you have to be very perceptive. You have to understand what's going on everywhere you are. So that's exemplified by Marduk having 4 eyes and 4 ears. Very powerful symbolism, as you can see. Yeah. So now, Tiamat is actually pissed off. Anu, the father of the gods, sees this going to really bad places. Tiamat is pissed off because Apsu is dead. And what Tiamat, this giant monster that we talked about in the beginning, Tiamat starts gathering all the forces of chaos, all the devils and demons, and she will try to fight the gods. Dragons, snakes, scorpions. This is Bosch, Bosch, the harrowing of hell. Very interesting pictures here. And one of the general of all of these forces of evil is called Kingu. And he's a general, as I say, and he has the tablets of destiny. The tablets of destiny is just a way to say that he's aware of the future. Yeah. So if you have the tablets of destiny, then it means you know what's going to happen in the future. So he's a very powerful demon. Very powerful demon. Would you face this army? No. No. Does it scare you? Yeah. So what's gonna happen actually? Ea goes to Anu, his father, and says, can't you do anything to stop this? You're the god of the sky. You're powerful. Can't you do anything to stop this? And Anu, the father, he says, but it was you that killed Apsu. I mean, why are you blaming me? It should be you actually doing something about it, right? So, okay, Ea says, and Ea is very wise, and he says, well, okay, I'm going to face Tiamat and I'm going to try to convince her not to curse our world. Yeah. So he goes to see Tiamat, but right before he starts to speak, he's just scared, turns around, and goes back home. Oh no. So Ea is paralyzed and cannot face Tiamat. What can the gods do? Well, basically, they have a gathering. They have a gathering and they talk about what they can do. And one hero raises to the occasion. Who is this one hero? It is, of course, Marduk. Marduk, the son of Ea. Marduk raises to the occasion and says, well, I am brave enough to take on this challenge and kill the serpent Tiamat, the monster Tiamat. But he will not do it for free. Of course not. Would you do it for free? What do you want then? What do you think he asks for? Absolute power. If he is to defeat the forces of chaos and the demons and the scorpions, well, he wants absolute power, of course. I'm not going to do it for free. Then, if I kill this monster, then I'm the king. I am the king of heaven. And he says, well, to defeat Tiamat and save your lives, convene the council, name a special fate, and let me, my own utterance, fix fate instead of you. Whatever I create shall never be altered. And then, of course, since there is no other contestant, the gods actually agree and they say, well, give it a try. You're honored amongst all the great gods. Your destiny is unequaled. Your word has the power of your grandfather, Anu. And that's how they say, okay, Marduk, do what you can and you will get what you want, actually. You will be at the top of the hierarchy. And this is exactly the same story that we saw with Zeus. Zeus, basically, to become the most powerful god, what does he do? Well, he banishes his father to Tartarus, right? He takes on Kronos. It's the same story. If you want a position of power, you need to demonstrate that you are capable of yielding such a responsibility and such a power. So these gods, to me, seem very human. And basically what happens later is that Marduk seizes Tiamat with a net. So he throws a net to this serpent, this monster, and encircles chaos, imprisons chaos. The net is a very powerful symbol trying to tell us that chaos cannot move. It is contained. Yeah? Tiamat, this monster, tries to swallow Marduk, tries to swallow him, bringing him back into nothingness, but he resists, yes, and he blows winds into Marduk, into Tiamat, and then basically he shoots an arrow inside his mouth and kills the monster. Yeah. And then also he not only defeats Tiamat, this primordial serpent, primordial monster, but also Kingu, that general that I showed you, that was very, very dangerous. So Marduk, he legitimizes his role as the king of the gods by defeating chaos. And we have seen this in the Greek mythology. Yeah? It's the same topic again. I told you in the last lecture that we were going to talk about serpents. The Enuma Elish does not explicitly mention that Tiamat is a serpent, to the best of my knowledge, which is a terrible monster that lives in the waters. So you can pretty much assume that it's a serpent. And we will do this now for the sake of this lecture. We talked about serpents in the previous lecture when we talked about the serpent that surrounds Midgard, the middle world for the Norse mythology. And we saw how Thor had to face the serpent, and they basically both died in the end at Ragnarok. Yeah? So this is one of the serpents that we have already seen. But what other kinds of serpents do we have in mythology, in religion, in literature? Well, St. George, right? The very famous myth of this martyr from the 4th century. Basically, the story goes that he kills the dragon now, and then out comes the roses, and he marries the princess. But also we have serpents in religion here with St. Michael. St. Michael, the archangel St. Michael, right? He's the one that actually is always represented as killing the serpent, that is Satan, yeah? But actually, if you go back even more, you see in Greek mythology that Apollo, one of the first things that he does when he's born is that he kills the serpent Python. So there are serpents everywhere. Well, why is that? Maybe there is some sort of underlying idea here also, right? It seems to resonate very well with our way of thinking and our creativity, to put serpents, to associate serpents to the forces of evil and the forces of chaos. Well, the evolutionary psychology can tell us a little bit about this as well, because we did not appear out of nothing, yes? And our mammal brains, they seem to be tuned to recognize reptiles, serpents, and actually spiders also, pretty quickly. There are studies that show that, yeah, even from a very early age, toddlers, they can recognize serpents in a background very quickly. Why? Maybe it has something to do with our past, as our past story, our past history as mammals. Yes, it made evolutionary sense to be scared of serpents. Yes, it's in our brains. Then the Act 3, actually, the creation of the world, the very creation of the world. Now we saw that Marduk has defeated the forces of chaos, and now it's time to actually create the world. So how does he do it? Well, the same way as the gods created the world in the Norse mythology with Ymir. Yeah? He basically takes the serpent, the monster, and here's what the Enuma Elish says. It says, he divided the monstrous shape and created marvels from it. He slices her in half like a fish for drying. Half of her he puts to roof the sky. He drew a bolt across and made a guard hold it. What is the bolt in the sky? The Milky Way. Of course, we need to try to understand where we come from. So then her waters he arranged so that they could not escape. So he has contained chaos, as we say. And he founded cult centers for Anu, Elil, and Ea. So basically what this is telling us is that our world is profane. So there is a very important component that is not sacred. Yeah? But there are sacred places also, like the cult centers for Anu, Elil, and Ea. That's what it's telling us, that there is a little bit of divine in our world as well. But not only this, but the Babylonians were very smart, and they saw that the moon also had to appear, so he made the crescent moon appear. And when Shamash looks for you from the horizon, this is what they say. So when the sun looks at the moon from the horizon, gradually shed your visibility and begin to wane. Always bring the day of disappearance close to the path of the sun. Why? Because we see actually that the moon and the sun follow the same arc in the sky. That's because the planets actually are in the same plane of orbit. That's the ecliptic. So that's a very interesting way of accounting for it, right? So this is the fundamental part of the Enuma Elish, and as I said, it was highly ritualistic, and all of this creation of the world was recreated every new year, the fourth day on New Year's, because basically your ruler, your king, has, if he is legitimized to be your king, he has to be a good Marduk. Yeah? He has to contain chaos, and chaos here are not snakes, but are diseases, wars. Yeah? So our king has to demonstrate that he is actually a good Marduk, and this is why they recreate all of this. Yeah? And they ask the king, have you been a good Marduk or not? Look, this is what you've done right, this is what you've done wrong. Hopefully you've done right more things than wrong. Yeah? So this is why I said that it was highly ritualistic, interesting. But then we are lacking the last part here that I think is the most interesting for us, right? How was humanity created? Well, the creation of man is actually retold in another story called Atrahasis, yes, and it's from the year 1700 before Christ. And basically the story goes like this, that of course human beings are created from clay, yeah, just like all other mythologies, actually. And it is Ea, the god of wisdom, and another goddess that create men. And they actually separate 7 pieces for man and 7 for women. So it's quite egalitarian. It's not only men, it's actually men and women. So that's interesting. But then it happens exactly the same as it happened when the primordial beings created the world, and men and women, they become too noisy. They become too noisy. It's always a party. And then the gods gather and they say, well, what are we going to do with this? The purpose of creating mankind, by the way, was to do the work that the gods didn't want to do. It's like, yeah, we have created the world, that's it. Yeah. So they say, okay, what are we going to do actually? And they start coming up with ideas. Send them a famine. Okay, a lot die, but not all of them. They say, send them sickness, a virus, something, yeah? No, they don't die, actually, they recover, right? And then Enlil, another god, Enlil, he says, well, maybe we should send them a flood. Drown them, all of them. And that's it. I'm tired of this, yes? He says, and Enlil, this other god, wants to send them a flood, but Ea says, no, but it's my creation, right? I cannot kill my creation. And he says, and he chooses one man called Atahasis, and he tells them this. He says, make sure you attend to all my words. Dismantle the house, build a boat, save living things, and then the flood comes, yes? The floor roared like a ball, the darkness was total, there was no sun. And then the flood comes, as I say, wipes out the entire earth, but this guy, Atrahasis, he survives. So Enlil says, oh, no, but we actually sent this to kill all of them. No life form should have escaped, yes? So he's very pissed off. But what happens then? What happens then is very interesting. That they decide that, okay, Atrahasis may live, humanity may recover again, but from now on, humanity is mortal. Humanity is mortal. They have a definite amount of time that they can live. So that's the purpose of the flood, actually. Because in all the accounts of creation that we have talked about until now, the gods create man and women, but they don't say how long they should live. Yeah? And the Babylonians, they actually tell us, well, it was because of this. Yeah? That it's, of course, it's symbolism. Yeah? But after that, humanity is mortal. And that's the story of creation of the Babylonians. And here is the recap. So we saw that the waters of chaos are, the primordial waters of chaos is the place where everything springs, right? From. And here we say that the world is created ex aquis, yeah? So from water. And we saw that it makes sense that the world was created from water. Then disturbing the peace, we saw that the gods arise from these waters, but they are very noisy, and they rebel against chaos, and chaos wants to delete them. So Marduk rises to the occasion, kills the serpent, and becomes the king of the gods. And then the actual creation of the world is by Marduk, and he does it out of the remnants of Tiamat. And we see here a myth of the flood. Yeah. Just one last comment on the 3 gods that we have been talking about. Anu, the god of the sky. Ea, the god of wisdom, the god of the waters, actually. And then Marduk is our god. Yeah? 3 gods, tripartite. If you know anything about the Catholic Church, you know about the Trinity, right? And there you have the Father. You can equate to Anu, the Father of heaven. Then you have Marduk, and that would be the Lord Jesus Christ, right? Jesus is our God here in earth, yeah, cares about us. And then you have the Holy Spirit. But the Holy Spirit is also called the Paraclete in Greek, and that's the sort of agent that makes sure that we're okay. after Jesus has come to the world. Yeah? So this is what he says in the Bible. Trinitarian hierarchy here. I mean, they are all the same, but divinity is tripartite, right? And we see also here that divinity is tripartite. Yeah, maybe this is an interesting idea for humanity. Yeah, and this is what Jung says. Carl Jung, the psychologist, he says that this is maybe an archetype of humanity. It makes a lot of sense to divide divinity into three. Yeah, just an epilogue. I told you about Cyrus. This is Cyrus's cylinder here. Yes, and here you see the Akkadian inscriptions. Basically, what Cyrus did was to conquer Babylon. And do you remember the king that I told you about, Nebuchadnezzar? Nebuchadnezzar II. He extended his empire to cover Judea, Israel, Syria. Well, one of the things that he famously does is that he basically destroys the temple in Jerusalem around the year 600, yeah, something like that, and 600 before Christ. He destroys the temple and he basically sends away all the Jews. It was a policy of scorched earth, if you know what that means in warfare. Yeah, so basically just destroys everything. And the Jews, what do they have to do? They have to leave. So they leave to Babylon. Yeah, and this is history. They go to Babylon, and that's the Babylonian captivity. That's where the Jews start living in Babylon for a while, until Cyrus, the Persian, comes, yes, and frees them. There is a very famous episode, right, in the Bible. I think it's the prophet Daniel. That there is this story. This is the last king of Babylon, and Nabonidus, and he sees the writing of on the wall, and it basically says, well, your kingdom is short-lived because someone's going to come, is going to take it away from you in Babylon. Yeah, Cyrus is going to come basically, and it's going to end your realm. Yeah. Curiously, the book of Genesis dates from around this period. The book of Genesis in the Bible. So does it make sense that maybe they took some inspiration to write the book of Genesis from these stories that we're talking about now? And not only that, we will talk about it in maybe 2 or 3 lectures. But Cyrus, he didn't believe in the Babylonian gods. He was actually a Zoroastrian. Zoroastrian still exists as a religion. And Zoroastrianism is the religion of one god. Yeah? It's one god called Ahura Mazda. Yeah? So the Jews that were writing the book of Genesis around that time, yeah, maybe they were actually influenced by not only the Babylonian stories of creation, but also Zoroastrianism. Yeah? So who is to say that the book of Genesis may have been dictated by God? It looks a lot like there is a human touch here. Yeah, there is a very interesting human touch, and this is what we will try to discuss in 1 month. If you would like to join again, 7th of December, we will actually try to deconstruct the book of Genesis, or the account of the story of creation of the Bible, to try to look for common topics that we have already discussed. And you will be surprised at how unoriginal, I would say, it is. Yes. That's pretty much it. Thank you very much.